Okay.
I think that's good to go. So yeah, hello, hi, welcome to the St. Paul's Community Projects. Here we're going to be discussing the wider framework of the Ashley Ward, mainly looking at two strands, one being the parks, and secondly being the museums. There's a lot of work that's gone into the St. Paul's neighborhood plan. And as we look at making sure that we incorporate other communities, other neighboring communities, we are looking at the rephrasing of the Ashley Ward, of the St. Paul's plan into the Ashley Ward. And there's a number of reasons that we're thinking about this, but I won't go into those right now. The students will elaborate more about why we're stretching a little bit on the border. What is important to be aware of if you are tuning in from home or tuning in after this recording is for a number of years, there used to be what was called St. Paul's Unlimited. When St. Paul's Unlimited stopped, it was very hard to coordinate activities within the community. So Cognitive Parts decided that we would try and keep this momentum going. And we consolidated the 3 different reports that were done in St. Paul's, and we made those into one document, of which the link will be on the YouTube link at the bottom, so you can see the whole plan as it's just put together from 3 separate projects. After doing this, we then, and this was also done by UE students, and now we have the UE students again at different cohorts. And this cohort is looking at parks because we thought that by putting the documents together, that wasn't enough. Now we need to focus on specific tasks, such as parks, such as a creative element of museum, and there'll obviously be other groups. So in this webinar, there is a call for any of the local residents that live within the Ashley and St. Paul's area to want to join, if you'd like to join and be part of the steering group that will move forward with the Ashley Ward plan, please get in touch, and the email will be below. The reason for this is in order to make this into a legal binding thing that influences planning decisions, we need to have local voices, local businesses, and residents' voice on board. So there's those 3 options. Either you're a business in the area, you live in the area, or keep forgetting the third one. Or you work in the area, that's right, or you work in the area, yeah. So I'll leave that with that. So thank you very much for joining us, and I'll leave it over to our coordinator, who's gonna just navigate us through this session, who will be introducing our next speakers, and also introducing our engagement tool called Slido. Over to you.
All right. Hi, guys. I'm Cholwe. I'll be basically your navigator for tonight. It's just a little bit of an informal chat and discussion that we're going on, so nothing too serious. So please do feel free to speak up when you feel like you need to. So this is just a live studio project that we're working on from UWE. We're all master's students that are working on this project. And like Sibda said before, it is the 2 projects. So the first one is the Ashley Green Space Network. That's to do with the parks. And then with the second project is the St. Paul's Museum. So we're going to split this into 2 workshops for tonight. So the first one being the Ashley Green Space from 6:15 to 7 o'clock. And then we're going to have a little 5-minute interval in between if anyone needs to have a cup of tea or go to the bathroom. And then we'll jump back in for the St. Paul's Museum discussion and workshop. And then we can end with conclusions and any questions that you guys might have. So like Sibs has mentioned before already, this session will be recorded. So if you don't want to show your face, you can turn your camera off. But yeah, so we're going to get started now. Nick is going to open up with the Ashley Green Space Network.
Right, good evening, everybody. So really, with the first branch or the first project, what we're focusing on is Ashley, as Sibusiso mentioned, but really focusing on the green spaces. And within these green spaces, within these areas, we know that there's a series of green spaces. Some of them are more prominent than others. But the mission statement for us really is to support a collective network that aims to activate the currently unrepresented public spaces throughout Ashley Ward. So that in itself might beg the question, what is an unrepresented space? What is a represented space? And over the last few weeks, we've sort of been tackling our heads around the issues as to why some of the parks don't get the support that they possibly need. Why do the bigger parks get the funding, get the grants, and really to understand that we need to understand a slight bit more about the park's infrastructure and how it's managed. So essentially, we have currently the management structure where we have the Bristol City Council, who work with the parks, the Bristol Parks Forum, who are an umbrella organisation for all the local parks groups. And then a lot of the parks within Bristol have a representative parks group, which would have a committee or a steering group. And this is very common among the bigger parks. For instance, Eastville Park has a very strong group. They've granted loads of funding over previous years. And some of the groups within Ashley Ward do have representative groups. For instance, Friends of Mina Park is an active group. We've been speaking to Friends of Montpelier Parks, which is recently reactivated. St. Agnes Park is a group, does exist still, but they're not fully involved in the Bristol Parks Forum. And today, why this is really relevant is because Bristol City Council are launching a new project, which is called the Bristol Future Parks Project. And what they're looking at is the way that the parks are procured, the way that they're managed, and essentially trying to create a new way of making parks work for everyone. So there has been various consultations in the past few years within St. Paul's and within Ashley and across Bristol for different parks projects. But as they say here, we acknowledge there are already many ideas that have been generated from past consultations. However, this project aims to shift the way we think about the management of green spaces and build energy around community-driven approaches to change and development. So I think it's really the idea of this project is trying to get the community to take control of their own spaces and enable improvement. So local spaces for local people, really. And obviously here we get the reality that the parks which have already got the stronger parks groups that have a large representation, their voice is the loudest voice and it's going to get heard first. So as we know, within St. Paul's, there's a vast majority of really small green spaces. Some of them are better kept, some of them are more maintained than others. And as we know, there was the St. Paul's Greenway. Some people might be aware of this. It was an architecture centre project that was launched earlier in the year, and they've had some really good initiatives to improve some of the local spaces in St. Paul's. Within Ashley Ward, we do also have Agnes Park, Montpelier Parks Group, as I just mentioned, but there's also additional green spaces within St. Paul's that we'll discuss in a second, which currently aren't represented at all. So really the idea of the Ashley Green Space Network is to look at the greater whole of Ashley and try to bring the voice of the community, the businesses, the people that live there, all of them into one network so that when the Future Parks project launches next year, we're already a step ahead in terms of that group, that steering group. We've got ideas and that's sort of the outcome that we're looking for, or that we're looking to present back to the community at the end of January. So firstly, what we're aiming to do is obviously assist in forming this network. A lot of us live in the area ourselves, but we're trying to matchmake. We're trying to find people in the community that are keen to be involved, businesses that they think could benefit from intuitive ways of managing parks or new systems. So the first thing is trying to help harness that community and get them involved. I think the second part of that is trying to get feedback from the community about the individual spaces, what works with the current spaces, what doesn't work, and some of that could be built on previous consultation. The third thing then is that we'll be looking to try and look at a tangible output. So with a map of all the spaces, what could some of these spaces become based on, the feedback that we get from the community? And is there potential interventions that could look for future funding? So supporting post expressions of interest. So hopefully this document at the end can be something that can be handed over to the community and identifying who the members in the community are that can really carry this forward to ensure that the Bristol City Council is listening to Ashley Ward and ensuring that we're prioritizing the spaces that need to be prioritized. So that's a real brief introduction to what we're trying to do. And I do think over the next month or two, what exactly we're doing is going to mold and form based on the feedback we get from the community. And that is a real basic introduction to the project. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Feliciano, who's going to just run a very short, hopefully engaging workshop, just to get some first ideas to help launch the project.
Hello guys, good evening everyone. So my name is Feliciano. I'll be running through the workshop with you guys. So first I would like to ask you guys to access the slido.com from any device. It can be from your computer or from your mobile phone. So the reason I'm doing that, because you're gonna go through some questions and then you guys will be answered the question through the Slido. The reason we're doing this workshop is to make sure you guys are aware of the green spaces we have in samples area and afterwards as well. So it's really important to have that feedback so we can provide the best green space for the community. So once everyone is ready with the sliders, so you can go through the questions. I'll give you some time so you can everyone set up the slider. Once you get into the slider, please make sure you put hashtag local parks. So then it will give you access to the questions. If anyone needs any help or if you struggle with anything, just please let us know so we can help.
Maybe if you can let us all know when you're ready, you can just maybe put a thumbs up in the group chat.
Yeah, so we can go through the next step.
I haven't received anything. Is it by email that you sent it?
No, if you can just access slido.com.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay. Okay.
Yes,
Sorry.
and then you can access through using hashtag local parks.
Local park. Okay.
Yeah, local parks.
Yeah, you don't need to put in the hashtag. You just need to put in the local parks in the bit that says the code, and then it will take you straight to the questions. Okay, perfect.
Fabulous.
Very nice.
Wow. Oh, wow. Okay.
Wow, indeed.
Wow.
It's gonna be fun.
Perfect. So is everyone ready? Just so we're
Yeah.
not leaving everyone behind. If you can all just give like a thumbs up so I can just double check that you're all on there.
Yeah. So we can all go through.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We're just about to start.
Yes. So the first exercise, so it's more like to make sure you guys know the green spaces in samples and afterwards. So we'll be going through some slides, which got some green spaces that we select in the area. And then would you like to, you guys answer the question and name the parks? So I'm gonna give you about 20 seconds so you can answer the questions. It's quite simple, and then you're gonna pass through the next one. So everyone can see the questions.
Yeah,
So
but I can't see. I could just see a list of choice of answers, but I can't see any pictures or anything.
Oh no, the picture we are on our presentation that we're sharing right
okay.
now.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
So do we just put what? This is number one only.
So yeah, that is the first park, and then on the slider you're gonna have the options. So if you select the option you think this park is,
We don't have to press any send thing or anything like that.
No. That's all going to be at the end for you to submit. So if you just, on the first one, it says name the parks. If you just answer the first question, and then if we move on to the second question, Nick, when you're ready, and then you just answer.
Yeah,
so,
the second park is available now, so you can have a look and then just answer the question. So please just go through the question once you show the slide, and then we can move at the same time.
Next slide.
I'm confused. Oh, there it is. I mean the park too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are in the park 2 now. If anyone have any problem, just let me know so we can.
I missed part 1, but okay, that's fine.
Do you want me to go back? That's part 1
sorry,
right now?
guys.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
please.
That's okay. It's a bit confusing for the first time.
Okay.
We get a prize if we get them all right.
we can give you a round of applause.
Okay.
So Nick, I think you can pass for the second one again. So everyone is answered the second question now. Maybe you could go through the third question. Yeah, perfect. So
yeah.
we have the third park. Okay. So we got the fourth park available now, so you guys can have a look and answer the question as well.
Ooh, mate,
Oh
the name
no,
of
I
this
can't
park.
believe
Is
I
there a
don't know
name?
that one. I can't believe it. I go there every day, man.
That's the reason we're doing this. So we'll find
Oh.
out from your day.
I'm gonna take a guess. Okay.
I want to
Okay.
know if there's a name for this park.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay, it's probably that one. Okay. Yeah.
The answers we got there were quite helpful.
Who's
Maybe you can go for elimination.
Yeah, that's what I just.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
park nine.
we got the fifth park available now, so we can have a look.
This is embarrassing. Okay.
What?
Oh, God. It's embarrassing because I don't know it and I go there every single morning. Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Okay, I think you can go for the next one, Nick. Thank you. So you got the sixth. So if everyone answered the question right, so you can go for the next. If that's okay, yeah. So we got the seventh. If that's okay, so go, yeah, we got the eighth, the next one.
Oh.
So we're almost in the end. So in the end, we can have some time. Maybe you guys can share your thoughts or ask any question. So we got the ninth. So is everything okay for everyone? You could.
Yeah, so far so good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah.
So we got the 10th, and then after you got to left.
Oh.
So whilst you guys are having a look at these green spaces, if you can maybe just start thinking about what you like about the green spaces and maybe what you don't like, just so you can prep yourselves for the next exercise. But
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
just visually have a look now.
Maybe you can go for the next one, Nick. Thank you. Okay, then we have the last part, which you guys can answer the question now. Okay, so we have 12 parks in the list. I believe most of them you guys know already, like we've been using those spaces. But it's important for us to know how many of those parks the most of people use them. There is anyone have any thoughts to share with us? So feel free to talk or even like text us if you do like.
What's to share? I didn't realize. It's embarrassing. I didn't realize we have so many parks in this area. Well, we do because you see it every day, but in a list like that, it's just so wonderful. It opens your eyes like visually to what we have available on our doorstep.
Yeah.
And most of them are lovely, but there are some obvious reasons why I avoid some of those parks, and it's related to the other issues that affect the area, which is drugs and litter and maybe taking pride or feeling a sense of pride when we're in the community. Like I feel it in Adventure Park a lot. I feel it in St. Agnes Park. I feel like happy. I'll take my kids there and I'll avoid certain other parks because I don't feel they'll be safe there, or I don't feel like my kids will go to certain parks and they'll just cry because they'll see litter everywhere and they really hate litter. So they'll literally get really upset. So I prefer to avoid it for some of those reasons. But yeah, it's made me realize that there's so much potential just seeing the pictures like that in a list. So that's really nice actually to see that.
That's really good.
Thank you, Tara. That's the reason we are work on this project, because we really would like to see those spaces being using more often. You want to see the community engaging with themselves and on those spaces, and we're trying to work hard to make sure we provide the best space for the community. I really appreciate your comment. That if anyone would you like to?
Luciana, I just had a thought. Maybe we should answer the rest of the Slido questions, because everyone needs to submit before we can go through the answers.
Okay, sure.
So maybe we run through these, answer the last 2 questions, and then we can go back, run through the Slido, and then have an open discussion at the back of these last 2 questions.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect. So the next 2 questions wouldn't take long. So the next question will be, which park don't you use and why? So if you could, you can select as many parks as you want. And if you can just share with us some of the thoughts why you don't use those parks. And then it will be great so to have that feedback. I'll give you some time so you guys can look at through the parks and answer the question. So if everyone is, when it's ready, if you let us know so we can go through the next question.
Oh.
All right, I've submitted mine.
Okay. So should we go to the next? So then, why do you use?
Yeah. So the next question is, why do you use those? Which park do you use and why? So it's similar to the previous one.
Jeez.
So maybe you can select your favorite parks, as I said before, so you can select as much you want. It doesn't have to be just one, and then you could explain us why you like those parks.
It's interesting. I'm looking at these, and you know, we run a Friday football session, and we end up having to use football pitches that we pay close to £55 an hour. And when you think about who uses parks, you kind of feel like parks are taken over due to people that are suffering in their own lives, you know. So homeless, you got tents, you got people with tents here in St. Paul's, just outside here. So automatically, you know, you feel like you don't want to disturb them, but yet they disturb you in the area, but you don't want to disturb them. You kind of like understand their pain, but you're like, but why are you in this area, making this area look bad? Why are you gonna put your tent in Clifton? And then you kind of just like, you know, just leave them. And then you like get off and you're like, it plays on people's emotions about how they feel about, you know, maybe, yeah, people need a place to stay. Yeah, stay there. But then in other areas, maybe people are like, no, get away, get out. We don't want you here because this is for our children. And you can see that strictness is not the same in lower social demographics, is that we're not as strict about protecting our spaces for children. But
I do think there's a lot of, sorry to cut you, but I feel strongly about this because I think there's other factors that play in it. So if I've had, let's say, traumas in my childhood, or if I've, you know, had to flee a certain country to come here for safety, when I see a homeless person, the first thing I do is I relate to them. I offer them a cup of tea, or I offer to get them something from town. And then I also feel bad for doing that because I'm like, this person probably has a lot of pride. They probably were something way more special than me and you put together. You know, you never know their history. So I think if these lower, you know, these deprived areas that they call it, that we live in, I think there's a lot of sympathy between us as people. I think that we relate to each other on the ground level. So, you know, there's certain tents on the way to town that they do disturb the look of the park. But these people have been there for so many years that now they're my friends. And I just think if you're not there, if we refer you to some organization, they're just going to put you somewhere. They're going to forget about you. You're not going to be in our sight anymore. And then I'll worry about these people. So it does play on your conscience a bit, you know, it really does. But if they don't go there, what happens to them? Like,
there's a very interesting example in London at Clapham Common Park where they've created local businesses within the park. I think they've got a coffee shop on either side of the park, which is run by rough sleepers from the park. So they've sort of enabled them to, you know, self-support themselves to be able to move out of the park. But then because people know them within the park, it automatically brings in more interest within that business. So it's like building community, but welcoming people to community of all varieties as well, or of all social backgrounds. Okay.
Oh, no, go on.
No, sorry, Emma, please.
I was just thinking, is there an issue that we have with the parts that we're looking at in BS2 here that are much smaller in their scale? So they have conflicting uses and users of the park. And so if you're pushing a higher amount of users into a smaller space with different needs, conflict or removal from that situation for other people trying to avoid conflict is more likely to happen. So that disengages people. I just said a lot of words and not very much in those words.
So
what I didn't get what you meant. It sounded good, but I just didn't get. Sorry, say that again, please. Did you mean that,
okay, so
you know, the places where there's... Yeah.
Succinctly, we've got a lot of very small parts compared to Clifton or, you know, St Andrews or other areas in BS2. And we've got a high density of population and a lot of people wanting to use those spaces for different needs. So you've got older people wanting to use them, young people to play football, but then actually the football might bang into someone's tent, which is their home.
Yeah.
You know, lots of people trying to use a very small amount of space, which is going to increase conflict.
Yeah.
Or has the potential to increase conflict. And people can't make avoidant strategies because there isn't the space to do that.
That's like the parks in between the blocks. I mean, there's parks there and there's hundreds of kids from 4 blocks that look onto one tiny space and they want to play football, but they're not allowed to play football because every block has got a notice on it saying no football games. So what do I do when a kid hits my window with a football? Do I be that angry neighbor that flips out, or do I just understand that you're only a kid trying to have fun? Is not, you know, it's tricky, like you said, it's dense, it's, you know, we're all compact here in the community, and then there's small parks to share. And yeah, it's, I mean, we don't have that problem in St Agnes, we don't have that problem in St Paul's Park, you know, it's nice, everyone just uses the space, there's no conflict on how to use that space or feeling like you're sitting on top of each other if you use that space.
And do you think it's possibly because those parks have been planned in a way that determines the use of them more than a generic open space?
I do think so. I do think so. Sorry, I'm going to stop soon because I feel like I'm taking up a lot of space, but I wanted to know in your project where there's room for people like me, because I not only live here, I also do a lot of door knocking. Before now, I've been doing a lot of door knocking, talking to people about it. My job is basically community coordinator for a charity, local charity, and I basically go and knock on people's doors and say, what do you enjoy about living here? What do you not enjoy? And a lot that has come out has been litter, drug use, space use of parks and green spaces. I'm also actually, as an offshoot to the Greenway project, in Holston Drive, there's going to be, I'm helping to start up a resident-led wild growing space. And from that, there were questions about the other green space, the green space between the 4 blocks. And people are saying now, well, why don't we grow flowers there? Why can't we make that an attractive place? And we never use that anyway. We just go past it, go around it, you know, to get to town. So is there room for me to feed that back into what you guys are doing at all? Because I've got a lot of information that I can't do as one person. I'm trying to do little things in the community myself, but as one person with so much information, I'd love to feed that back to you guys somehow.
Nick,
yeah, that's really helpful.
We can definitely arrange a point to discuss that, I think.
I'll stop now because I've taken up a lot of time, but that's really what I want to come here for.
No,
I'm going to stay on.
That's a good point,
I wanted to
Tara.
feedback. Yeah.
So one of the additionalities on this, as I was explaining when we started, is that there's opportunities emerging. So as we were doing this, we're not aware that City Council wants to do consultation around parks. So now we've merged this and the discussion around parks with City Council. And what's emerging then is that they want to do a consultation about use of parks on the basis that they want to procure out parks. Yeah. So on the basis that you want to procure parks out, then procurement is not something that a small organization can take on. So it's much better if there's a collaboration about how a group comes together to look after parks. Yeah. And obviously then you're also looking at the equipment, you're looking at the labor, you're looking at the amount it will take to maintain and run parks. Yeah. So right now this is more about the use of parks, but then we want to also have a discussion around the business of parks, so that we understand the niceness of painting, putting flowers, growing things, managing spaces, as well as the costs of doing all of that, so that you maintain a seasonal program of parks and usage and everything else. And also about the booking system, about, if you want to do an event within the Ashley Ward, but the students will touch on that. The City Council consultation also links with other housing organizations that want to, they've got budgets on how people can get involved in developing some of the suggestions or recommendations that can come from there, along with other recommendations that didn't come from here. So all of these things are coming up in the meantime. We're only finding out as we're doing this. So it would be good to get in touch to further support the work that you're doing, and also to get in touch with organizations that are not on this call, but are in different areas that are thinking about how they want to use the parks. Is it maybe doing a tree house? Is it this? Is it that? Whatever that may look like. All of those concepts are really interested. And more interestingly, it's about how do the different forums come together to unite under one umbrella to go for an opportunity of managing green spaces within that locality. Which we're not touching on as much today, but that is more or less where this is leading towards. Sorry, it's about consortium development around green space usage and maintenance of localities. All right.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think one of the main things that has come out from my community engagement, especially over lockdown, is the need. Just the pure need for us to be in contact with nature, green spaces. In these flats, you can't go out, you can't come in, you can't go out. So, we've all got kids, and sometimes it's the struggle, you're enclosed and you just want that contact with nature heals, and we don't have that, and we've got all the space. So when it comes to planning what to do with the space, that I'm sure you've already got that in mind, the need for our mental well-being for the community, just to be in touch with nature and with our roots, really. And I think that came out quite a lot during COVID, that we really need that to heal and to be able to move on from this COVID life.
Sorry to cut you off, we've got 5 more minutes, but we've still got a little bit more. I think Nick is going to share with everyone the Slido results, so that we can maybe get everyone thinking about what who knows the parks and who doesn't know the parks, and sort of what kind of feedback you want to see in your parks, and then from there there's just going to be a little bit of, so for Tara, for example, all the information that you've given us is really, really good and would be really helpful for us. If you could email it to us. I think Nick will briefly give you the details at the end of how you can give us back your feedback, and then we can use that for our project. So I'll just let him carry on now.
So yeah, let's just briefly run through the parks that we named, just so that we learned something if we didn't know them. So the first one was Brunswick Square. a lot more common. We got 100% right. Second one, Portland Square, 100% right. I think it might get trickier as we get through. St. Paul's Park is quite a big park. 67% got that right. We will happily share the slides back if anyone wanted, but we just realized walking around the parks how many different parks there are and what they're named. So Prince Street Green Space is the name of that small corner park. Holston Drive Green Space, which I think is where there's some ongoing work with a community garden project, which might be what Tara was talking about. The Grosvenor Road Green Space, Ludlow Close Park was actually the right answer. So, or it's also known as Grosvenor Road Triangle. And then St. Agnes Park, everyone seemed to know. Mina Road Park, again, slight combination between those two. So what's clear is that out of this is that the bigger parks are known and that these small interstitial spaces are possibly less known. And then just interesting for us, I think something for us to kind of take away and have a look at. No one uses Dalrymple Park, and I can understand why no one uses Dalrymple Park. But again, it appears that the smaller spaces that are right next to the residential spaces are used less than the bigger parks, and then my assumption is that this would be. But just to briefly touch on these, antisocial behavior. We don't know about them, so maybe even something to do with wayfinding, signage, making people aware of what assets they have available to them in itself could be beneficial. Litter and drug use, don't live in the area, that's fair, and they are dirty. And I'll skip through that. So really the inverse of the others. So for me, what I'm automatically seeing is that the smaller spaces, which have had less care, automatically lead to less people using them. So if you were to look at a framework approach, or it enables the people with the smaller voices to be heard sometimes when you've got a collective approach to something, as opposed to just a Eastville Park with 50,000 members getting a larger voice. So lastly, I think we just want to briefly run through what our next steps are. As I said, please do feel free to email us any pictures, drawings, ideas, words, thoughts, whatever you'd like. We have sent an email earlier with the link around from this email address, but we are also going to be in the parks once lockdown ends over the next few weeks. And we want to run this thing with local schools, which is going to be called the Park Imaginarium, where we're trying to get people to think not only beyond what they have currently, but really looking at why not dream beyond litter, those issues you would hope with funding, correct management, we'd be able to get to the bottom of, but possibly dreaming beyond, kids have an amazing imagination, and that's something we're looking to harness. And then lastly, just closing off what's happening next. So we'll still be working on this for quite a while through December and January at the least. So today is the launch really we've been doing some investigation into the brief, and we're going to be working in the background, speaking to local councillors, local parks groups, local businesses, hopefully more residents, schools, and we'll be doing that up until sort of mid-Jan, at which point we want to have an event where we're going to feed back to the community what they've said. Hopefully we can hand over and share some of the framework and the documents that we've pulled together to assist the community going forward with the parks consultations that will be taking place starting from next year. So hopefully this project's really come at a perfect time in terms of this public engagement, and St. Paul's, Ashley Ward as a community can be in a really good place come February to really hit the ground running when they start looking at funding and expression of interest. So that's everything from us at Parks. I don't know if you have any brief questions. Otherwise, we can take a short break.
Nicholas,
Yes, Fiona.
I just wanted to say that there was that moment where the St Paul's Triangle, Grosvenor Road Triangle, and Ludlow Close Park
Yes.
get a bit mixed up, and I would have mixed them up. I think what's really important is knowing the names of some of these parks, because there are some there that we don't really give a name to necessarily, and if you don't have a name for it, you kind of can't. You can do your best with it, but you can't kind of look after it in the same way. So it's fantastic that it's a great quiz.
It is good, because with the one outside Dad's Cat, I call it the Statue Park, and I've been here for 8 years. I just call it the Statue Park, and it's a big shame, because it's a lovely space. It's very lovely. I think when you add a name to something, straight away it's like ownership, isn't it? You identify with it, and that's a very good point. Yeah,
it's fabulous.
Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Well, hopefully that's something we can maybe try and lift throughout the community in terms of knowing your space. Great, so that's me. I'm going to stop sharing. And, oh, Emma, sorry, would you like to...
Sorry, yeah. Another one. Something that you were saying earlier, it was about sort of wanting to be able to harness the community into, this has been quite core to the whole project. But I was just wondering, sort of, the flip of that question is, what's driven the community away from being engaged in the first place? I mean, what...
From my personal investigation, I think if you look at some of the affluent areas which have got a large representation within their parks group, I think people are more, within those areas, if you look at a lot of these parks groups, they're quite often managed by sort of older people normally, which have got a fair amount of time and experience in managing and steering projects like this. They possibly are more aware of the management structures that are in place and the ability to change something through that. And I think that the evidence is that St. Agnes Park is the only one that has a friends group, and they no longer are represented on the Bristol Parks Forum. So whether people were driven away or whether they've never been made aware of the potential to improve their spaces is sort of my question back to that. And if people were made aware.
I think there's more to play in this.
People from being able to... Oh, so on.
Sorry, Emma, you carry on, because I've got a negative thing to add, but I'll do that after.
I was just wondering whether sort of certain areas have more established communities, and some communities are more transient, sort of high student populations and things like that might change the demographics, whether there's a time availability and the pressures that are set on families or people that live in an area that may be working 1, 2, 3 different jobs.
Yeah, I think it's the once again, that word deprivation. I'm well connected to the situation up in Montpellier with some of the people in the Friends of Montpellier groups and the green groups up there, and those people within their street, if they want to do something today, by tomorrow they've got an answer, because their neighbors are well connected. Their neighbors know someone that knows someone, and there's a pot of money that they know is available, and they could do that overnight. One thing. And if we do that here in St. Paul's, where families are larger, there's so many dynamics where families are larger, you've got more to do. I've got 3 kids under 8, and by the time I've sat down to have a think about what my needs are, there are more things that I need in my life than a green space. Green space for me is like a luxury for me to have time to think about working on, whereas actually, if I think about it truly, my religion, my culture, everything tells me to look after the green space around me, to be a shepherd of it, So it's really interesting, because we could work with community leaders and religious leaders to bring out these things, to talk about these things more. I mean, the M32, for example, M32 maple trees is right in the middle of all these parts of Ashley. Okay. But even if you look at the artwork that's going on to represent, the community that's protecting those trees, is all white people. I don't understand where are the coloured people? Where are the people people like me that care about a cause like that? Where's the rest of us? Even for me, it's hard sometimes, because I know there's people that think like me, but I think there's more to play. I think we've got bigger families. sometimes, you know, financially, these are things that there's other troubles. Let's say there's other troubles in our lives that come first, and people in Montpellier and Webex are well connected, much more well connected. They're more, you know, they're already on that level, and then they could take it to the next level. We haven't even begun from the very, you know, just even getting communities together. And I think a lot of it is being on the ground and doing door knocking and seeing people like you doing it as well really does help the cause. It really does help. And that's why I'm stuck on the ground doing community work, because I represent my community. I feel like as soon as I say salam alaikum, there's barriers already. So I think that is very helpful. I think people that you think represent you being involved in things can have an impact.
Absolutely.
On how people get involved.
And we see the same thing with the neighborhood plan. And on the basis that you need to either be a business within the area, a resident, or always
a worker.
A worker.
Yeah. A worker.
And what automatically happens is that you know, with some of the groups that have recently happened, the skilled based people see the opportunity way down there, right? And they'll start getting involved within something. And some of those things just necessarily don't move the community. I'll give you a prime example. It's recorded, so, but you know, it's just a clear example anyway. The M32 group, right? You know, you literally got activists, green activists, that are staying up, making sure that that tree doesn't get cut. Yeah. Now, if you have to think about the diversity of people involved in standing around, making sure that tree doesn't get cut, wow, I guarantee you it's less than 2%, if not 0.5. Yeah. That it doesn't mean that people don't care about nature. It's just the capacity of having to do that whilst in hardship with housing and employment and COVID and all these things is just like there, you know. Yeah. And as Tara said, that it ends up being that the green space becomes a luxury, whilst it's actually meant to be our closest thing. Yeah. And the access to it, when you're in those high rises, you look at the green space, it's this small. So it also puts you off that you end up using a green space outside of your area, you know, and not use the ones in your area. And most people, if they want to get involved in the neighborhood plan, I do it voluntarily. We've never raised any grant for the St. Paul's neighborhood plan. It's been hard to ever do because I'm not in planning. But whenever we ask any of the people that are in planning to help us, everybody wants to get paid. Yeah. So therefore, it's been really hard to get this going. And majority of the time, we do it with the students because the students are not asking to get paid. They're doing it for their experience, but we're also keeping the project going by facilitating and working with students. So it's the skill set, it's payment, and it's the professionalism of dealing within planning departments, architects, putting those documents together, that presentation, and making it, you know, quick, snap, let's move. And people then will be able to really get involved. So there is an equality gap.
Sorry to cut you off, Sibs. The museum group should be starting in roughly a minute. I don't know if anyone wants to take a quick break or if you just want to carry on. It's up to you guys, as I'm okay to carry on, but if anyone does need a break, maybe you can dash off for 2 minutes and people can still have a chat on this break if anyone needs a break. Now's the time to go.
Is it okay if I might go off camera in a minute while I get the kids in bed, because you might hear me like saying, get in bed.
No problem, that's perfect.
I will be engaging. I'll just be on mute for a little bit, just a little bit to get them in bed, yeah?
No problem.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, sorry, Sibs.
No, you're right.
If the museum group wants to start now, I guess we can do that, and then people can, you know, they'll be around, as Tara said. Unless you want a 5-minute break as well. If you guys want a 5-minute break. Up to you.
I'm happy to start now, but yeah, anyone, if you want a 5-minute break, just let us know and we'll just take a few.
Okay.
Cool. All right, then I will share my screen now. Bear with me. Cool. Can you see that? Okay. Yeah. I'm going to take that as a yes. Cool. All right. So pleasure to meet you all. Thank you for coming. My name's Callum. I'm part of the museum group. And this is just a short introduction, just to introduce us as a team and to go through our initial analysis on the concept of decolonising as a whole, as well as implementing that into a museum, and eventually how a museum might manifest itself within St. Paul's as a region. I'll give this quick short introduction now, take about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll go through the process of running a couple workshops similar to how the Parks group did theirs. We'll also be using Slido, so yeah. So first of all, is it going to work? Cool. I'd like to introduce you to our team. So we're a collective of 5 architecture students from UE who expressed our interest in the subject of decolonisation, and consequently we've been selected to run a community collaborative project at conceptualising the Decolonised Museum in St. Paul's region. So in our group you have me, Callum, we also have Eleanor, Georgios, Anna and Philippa. As we met as a group, we obviously know that we've come from different regions, and even just making that initial conversation and that intriguing finding out about each other's backgrounds, about each other's countries that we've come from, that has inspired us to delve deeper into this topic as we unleash sort of things that we never knew about each other and about cultures themselves. So our brief initially provided by the university was quite simple and quite arbitrary in the sense that they just said to us to envision a decolonised museum within a speculative site of 31 to 32 Portland Square. Obviously, Portland Square is quite a topical site, being the product of the slave trade, and so it has quite a powerful status in itself of choosing that as a site for a decolonised museum as this act of reclaiming the land. And then from this initial brief, we then went on to develop with our client, who is Subsuso, and we discovered through conversation and initial analysis that the concept of decolonisation isn't necessarily about capturing the cultural heritages of St. Paul's and the wider global context within one building, within one space. It's more of an engagement process, a conversation that needs to be continuous, and an opportunity to enlighten members of the St. Paul's community and to give them a megaphone, so to say, to voice their cultures and to share the backgrounds that they've come from, and so we can celebrate this diverse cultural collective. And obviously with the COVID challenges, we've been faced with the hurdle of trying to digitalize the process that we engage with the community themselves. And that has also been quite beneficial in enabling us to reconceptualize how a museum might manifest itself, whether it is the need for a building to be a collective of artifacts, as it has been in the past, or if it begins to be this platform in which people may contribute equally to and continue sustainably. So just initially, through our analysis, we were looking at the decolonising and what does it essentially mean. So it's quite a complex subject and can't necessarily be captured in sort of simple phrasing and housed within one sort of term. And so you have the what has been spoken about quite recently with a project in Nigeria run by David Ajay, where they are designing a museum to house the artifacts, the Benin bronze artifacts, to be returned to their native grounds. But we, through our discussions, discovered that decolonising is more than a material and physical entity. It's an ideological scenario that needs to occur in a multitude of disciplines through education, politics, and so forth. And it becomes something that we need to adapt in our everyday lives, the way we see the world, the way we interact with our neighbours, the way we see businesses, and focusing on how cultures have been commodified and how we can go against this. And so taking that term of decolonisation and applying it to the museum to create the Decolonised Museum brings up all sorts of questions. And like I said before, it's not necessarily material or physical matter, but it's ideological. And we need to think of how history can essentially be rewritten to come from the perspective of the individuals themselves and not through this bottleneck of representation, one person voicing and summarizing cultures. It's not about that. It's providing an opportunity that people can engage and share knowledge and connect with one another. And removing that binary way of viewing the world that conforms to only the Western ways. We want to share these diverse cultures and get people to connect and share the way that they live their lives. And here's just a short, a quick diagram that we kind of summarized our findings so far. We understand there's so much more that we want to learn from the community themselves, St. Paul's. But what we imagine the comparison between the Decolonised Museum and the Colonised Museum, looking at as a building that might be, the Colonised Museum that is a building that might be just a collective of, you know, artifacts that have been stolen from around the world and curated by Western cultures and reappropriated in such a negative way, whereas the Decolonised Museum has the opportunity to be something that is live and living, and conversations between one another and sharing of knowledge, sharing of stories. And we need to think of a way of democratically archiving this information. And then that begins to work into the idea of reconceptualizing exchange, thinking of cultural knowledge as currency. How can we think of a world that doesn't get fueled and powered by fortune and money, and think of a world that is more of an equal sharing of the sort of invaluable experiences that we have from our cultures. And again, this is just like a select few. Construction methods is up there as a sort of fascination in the architecture realm, but there are so many more than just here. And thinking about how we can make change as individuals, it's not, yeah, like I said, a single answer. There's not a single solution. It's a continuous conversation, and it's important to ask critical questions about ourselves, about each other, and have a general openness and willingness to share each other's cultural identities and experiences that we've all had, and prevent that colonial relationship, and make sure that we actively prevent this and educate others to do so. And so here is what we have essentially planned to do ourselves. So again, we're looking at, with the COVID challenges, not being able to engage directly with the community is quite difficult, but that's also provided us a new insight and a way to be innovative about how we might represent the museum, which brought up questions about if it was a website or some form of platform that the St. Paul's community themselves can add to and curate their stories. And we are then also looking at both the local culture as well as the global culture. With a diverse demographic in St. Paul's, we've got that opportunity to really celebrate and delve deep into stories that might never have been told before, coming from the individuals. So one of our outputs we were looking at initially is potentially a website or an app that can help connect the information and the archived sort of knowledge with the physical place. So it might be a map that you can begin to use to navigate St. Paul's, to learn about its local history and identity. You might plan historical tours or routes. You might have representatives within the cultures, within the community, who will be willing to tell the stories themselves of St. Paul's. And then this might be able to collaborate with things like St. Paul's Carnival, where it's an opportunity to really showcase and exhibit the true power of collective identity. Again, through this website concept, we were thinking about, you know, who produces this? Are we able to put this in the hands of the people themselves? Are we able to hand this over to a youth group who could begin to manifest a website? Sharing that sort of ownership of the assets amongst the community themselves. And then again, we go back to the idea of conceptualizing the museum as a building. For us, we see this as quite a valuable tool to begin to raise numerous questions about hierarchy, about layout, about the arrangements of space, and the importance of creating a very democratic environment that is equal. And yeah. So have we got any questions that anyone might have initially following that introduction?
It's going to be me, but if anyone wants to go before me, they should go ahead.
I will. I just wonder whether, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, whether you have connected with things like the museum service in Bristol, which are also working.
No, we have not.
These ideas. You have? You haven't?
No, we haven't. No, not yet.
Okay. I mean, I'm a resident in St Paul's. I've worked, Tara knows me, I've worked around here for a long time. And I'm freelance, but I also happen to work within the museum service. So these I work within several museums, in fact, in Bristol and Bath. And these thoughts are pretty universal. And there's a lot of knowledge there. Just saying, you know,
Okay.
You don't want to reinvent the wheel too many times. So.
Absolutely, and we've been feeding off some of the work Black Southwest Network has been doing around the museums, and working very closely with Sado and Christelle in terms of the research that they have been doing, and getting some feedback from what they are doing and what they plan on doing moving forward. So it'd be great to find out what other conversations, because also Rising Arts Agency have also been doing some work. So all we're trying to do is use some of that intelligence that has already been gathered through the different projects that we're aware of and the ones that we're not aware of, to find out from that and see how we can influence on those recommendations and how we can build up on those concepts whilst the students are available. And one of the things that we picked up on this site, what's it called? The Dove Lane development. So when the Dove Lane development was doing its archaeological research before the development, they found some prehistoric items. And it's like, great. So you have found some items. Where do you think you're going to put them then? You know? So having some of those discussions would really be great. And even like what Tyra was saying, is that some of these parks are, you know, people have named them into their own names because they didn't know what else to call them, or they didn't know what the name was. How about rebranding those parks, and actually that becomes in honor of someone, so then people then, you know, you get to see it. So, you know, talking about the whole pulling down the placard in town, and then we're gonna put something up. Well, in renaming parks, we're actually giving memories back into different areas, and that becomes those virtual museums in a way, you know, where that tells a story, that does something. So we've thought about those different kind of things, Barbara, but of course, you know, if we can get in touch with the museum again to find out any reports that they've got, any insights or any tips and suggestions that we can work with the students that could flesh out what those suggestions could look like, then that would be great. That'd be really great.
Well, I'd be interested in being involved in that conversation.
Correct.
If I've got time.
Your email? Sorry. Can you pop your email address at the bottom, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
So my thing, what I was going to say was, I've done a lot of door knocking around St Paul's, especially focusing on City Road, and there are some interesting people on City Road that are like almost 100 years old, and they've seen St Paul's in the time where no one would move in here, and apparently even the council would pay you to move here, or, you know, to attract you, to make it, you know, to make it attractive, and, you know, even delivery drivers won't come, no one would come. But these people are saying, I deliberately chose to buy a house here and come to St Paul's because there was the sense of community, and there was this and that, and I never felt unsafe here, and, you know, I've spent all my life here, and I just want my story to be heard. And I don't know if this is the kind of thing you're looking for, but you know, as far as I've got with that is getting them, you know, to this point they wanted the story in vocalized, so I got them to have a story in Vocalized, and that was all they wanted, because they've had a really rich life and they've experienced all of life in St. Paul's. I don't know if that ties in with what you guys are doing, but these are stories that will get missed out in consultations, because this lady, she can't come out. She's very old. I had to go up to her. This is pre-COVID. You know, I had to go up to her. I had to sit and take her story down and then pass it on to Vocalize, and that made me realize that there are stories that we might not be lucky enough to hear if we don't reach these people, because this is storytelling from their mouths, you know, so from their words, and she's lived a whole rich life, and yeah, like, she just inspired me so much from her story, and there's so much detail that I would have never known if I hadn't met her and knocked on her door that day. So that's one thing. And second thing is, we may know from our engagements in the community that some organizations here struggle to engage with the youth, so certain age groups, maybe from like 11 onward, because funds, you know, like there are funds, there are money pots that are for younger children, so it's easy to engage with younger children. But when it comes to the youth, there's like a big gap where they get left sometimes. And I'm wondering if you guys have the capacity to train up some youth to do the website or to contribute to it somehow, where they feel like, you know, there's two advantages. You've been trained up, you've been skilled up by inspirational people, and also for something that's going back into your own community. So have you guys thought about using like these fresh minds and talents that might be getting left out?
Yeah, definitely. So you might saw on one of the slides was a short, like a screen grab of how we started to conceptualize a website itself, but we then wanted to draw the line there. We didn't want to go in and design the whole idea and the concept. We've got like the base principles for it, and we would love to collaborate. I've sent a couple of emails out with a youth population and provide them some opportunities themselves to educate in future prospects, being, I don't know, website building, coding, all sorts, because technology is the future. So
yes.
And through doing that, we hand it over to the community themselves and empower them to start to focus around the topic of their culture and their community as well as a whole.
I think doing it through, you know, website producing and coding is really special, because there are other areas where some kids that are, you know, higher in the disadvantage and advantage scale, they have more opportunities to get into coding clubs. They have more, you know, finances in the family, but there are kids here who might be skilled. They just might not have access to digital services, or there's a lot that I think we're not, you know, these kids need to be seen and heard. And obviously, Sibs, you work with Hibbo, right? Or you know Hibbo, and she's got all her contacts, and these are people that we can engage with the youth. And, you know, people will sometimes say, oh, the youth are only good for getting in trouble, but if they have nothing to do, you know, there's spaces, there's green spaces, there's adventure parks, we can engage with them. It's just we need to pull them in, and this seems like a great project. And there's a lot of
and a gentleman has just joined us who exactly does code clubs. How are you doing, John?
Sorry, I was actually just supporting a code club up in Rugby. This online was fascinating. Apologies for the late arrival. No, I mean, I think, and I mean, Sibs has been involved with DigiLocal in the past, so that method of supporting young people from different backgrounds to be able to access the technology, the resources, the methodologies, the content for putting together some cool stuff is certainly something that I'm very keen to see how we do. I missed the slide, so I'm not quite sure what the context, the structure is.
Sure. So this was John. So obviously, once the UE students finish with design templates for a neighborhood museum, virtual museum, something similar to Seven Saints of St. Paul's, but you're looking at it being spread around different areas, and it becomes an app. Who would actually take up that app in keeping it updated and so forth? So what Tara was saying, if young people, if that's passed on to, let's say, DigiLocal, taking that responsibility to support young people to keep this app updated as part of everyday thing. Whilst they're learning coding, they're actually doing it on a practical community-based application so that they can see that, oh, people are actually using it and I'm doing it, you know? So that kind of stuff. So when you came in, it was like, wow, did you must have heard the vibrations, man.
And I'm guessing that one of the core design concepts is that whatever is undertaken right now is extensible beyond going forward. So bringing the carnival in, bringing the Seven Saints in, bringing the stuff that Nua is doing with autism in, all of that history, all of that can be layered up as we go, even if we start with something perhaps a little more achievable in the next couple of months.
Yeah, so the concept of the website is quite simple, and what we plan to do is just to create that relation to physical place. So the website itself is all orientated around a map, an interactive map that you can navigate, because that's a very readable format. And it'll begin to, like you say, layer on these topics, these events, these interactions, representatives, and begin to associate that to physical place. So someone could take this app and walk around St. Paul's, and actually it's like a guided tour essentially of St. Paul's. But you know,
Can you pull up your presentation again, please, mate, if you can?
yeah,
So
Can I just ask for advertising these things, do we never ever use the notice boards in St. Paul's? Because that would be a good place to say, hey, do you know about this app? We never use the notice boards. I've not seen, I don't even look at them anymore, to be honest.
no, it needs to be on TikTok these days.
Yeah. We do that on TikTok, guys.
so I don't know if you can see my screen now?
Yeah.
And I'll be more than happy to run through the format of the website. We've developed sort of a small animation to show how it might be run, but essentially what you would have is an interactive map that you could zoom into and highlight certain areas. You might click on one of these tabs and it will bring up sort of mark points so that you can actually begin to map out where the representatives are. And this might then be able to be overlaid with an interactive map for the carnival. And it's creating that association to place as well as the information that's within the community.
And this may be a little bit down in the details. Who curates what goes on the map?
So at the moment, we're trying to go through the process of collecting a lot of this information. Obviously, as that will continue, as new events happen within St. Paul's, it will need to be built upon. But we are, as a group, trying to collect this information, or this base information, to kick things off.
Sure, let me update on that, John. So there's the St. Paul's and Ashley meetings of organizations. And beforehand, Red Brick House had done a map of the different organizations, which is just a PDF. But now we want to make that into an interactive. So we've got a directory of businesses in St. Paul's. So those would be the ones that are, let's say, for example, that are here. Then we've got parks. Then you could have, something like heritage. You can see the Seven Saints. If there was shops, you could just select what you want to kind of choose. So it's more like who's updating it based on which new business has just opened, and so it just keeps growing theme by theme.
Yeah, and also I'm just thinking, if it's a public thing that's out there, you need some way of preventing it from being abused, Zoom bombed.
Where you come in, John? Good timing, mates. Honestly, literally, I couldn't have written it better. Thanks for joining.
Okay, I mean, it sounds like, I say, it's something that we've talked to a few people about in the past. It would be good to see how we can support this with some resources. So are you building the sort of initial version, or are you looking to bring a group of young people together to go through a skills process to produce this?
Yeah, so the development that we've done isn't a website by all means. None of us are coders or specialists in that. So we've just kind of set up the principles and the ideas of the website, and we're looking for a youth group to then go through the basic format of developing that into, even if it's just a functioning platform to just navigate around. It doesn't have to be a live website to start off with, but it's then, you know, the foundations for what can manifest further into the future. Cool.
So yeah, I'm just thinking it's not something that we currently have as a project that you could just drop the content into and off we go. But I think actually that would work to the advantage in that finding a group of young people, possibly in a slightly older age group than would be, if you like, the traditional DigiLocal 8 to 12-year-old, maybe working with the Malcolm X Centre or the Carnival or some of the other groups at that 14 to 16 age group, I can then put together some introduction resources to get them the basic skills in coding.
I think it would be interesting to get St. Paul's Adventure Park involved too, because they're really trying to engage with older scale, end of the scale of like the youth. So if there's any room for getting them on board, I think they might appreciate that. If just to put my comment in there. Sorry to cut your flow.
Fantastic. No, that's fantastic, because I think so. The bit I struggle with is although I am embedded and I do live in Easton, I'm not in those communities and I don't run a youth group as such. So working with the Adventure Park would be amazing. So I think that activity will take a little bit of time. So whilst we're pulling that together, then it might be an opportunity for the UE group to flesh out the design brief for version 1. And I can then also start to think about the technologies that are going to be involved in making that and the preparation material to support those young people when they come in. And I think that would then give us quite a good foundation to get those young people building the content whilst thinking about the legacy technology support.
Yeah, okay, perfect. That'd be brilliant. Well, I think we sent you an email as well, John, today, how you found this event as well. So we'll continue that conversation as well and try and get something going with that. And
what is the anticipated timeline?
So we will be working on this until around January, I think. Is it the 14th of January, Philippa?
I think so, yeah.
So we've got around the Christmas period to really try and develop some material for this. And then we'll be hopefully giving a presentation back to our client and other community members invited to show our progression from them. But then this will hopefully be something that we can continue or can be continued in the hands of the community.
Yeah, that's going to be a real stretch goal.
Okay.
They passing it on doesn't need to be live.
Yeah, no, I think
further.
Yeah, I think having a demo would work really well, and with a little bit of bounding, you could put something together that would demonstrate the concept very nicely and provide those young people with a view of how it would extend on, and then that would perhaps be the point of handing over to the wider community. Okay.
Yeah, I guess it's just more of a representation of the potential through doing a collaborative project like this that will, promote itself. Cool.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in. How do we help?
Okay. Well, we'll send you a few emails after this, and we'll get talking and possibly arrange a meeting that we can discuss further. Fantastic. I'm going to hand over to Eleanor now, who will go through some workshops just to generally depict our sort of understanding of communities and cultures. Eleanor?
Hello, everyone. Let me just share my screen if I can find the presentation. Oh, excuse me a moment. All right, it should work now. How do I do this?
I think if you go on slideshow.
Sorry, I'm terrible with PowerPoint. Yeah, okay, I got it. So we're just gonna start with a bit of questions to get some demographics of the group and help our research. So all answers will be anonymous. And if you could go to slido.com and type the hashtag museum ideas so we can get started with the questions. If you have any questions, just let me know. And if you could also let me know if you managed to log in okay.
No, I'm not. I can't even flipping. Slido.com, museum ideas.
All right, I'm in.
All right, I'll just wait for everyone to be logged in.
All right, just send the text, the link on the text, just in case. Yeah?
Thank you, Sibs.
Wow, this is so interesting. I never get asked in detail stuff like this. I'm always in the other box.
So is everyone logged in?
Yeah.
No. My computer's doing silly things.
Oh. Well, for the ones that are logged in, maybe start with the three first questions. So which age range do you fall into? Where were you born? And where were your parents born? And just let me know whenever you have answered these questions.
Bless you.
That's for you, Anton. Someone said bless you.
All right, so I've done those questions.
Yep, completed.
Yeah. Is everyone okay if I go to the next slide? Yeah. Oops. All right, then we're going to talk about languages and ethnicity. So please answer the question on Slido. What languages do you speak? And who do you ethnically identify as? Oops. And just let me know whenever you have completed the questions.
Barbara, do you know what I'm going to answer for the question that asks about food? Do you know what I'm going to answer?
No, you tell me.
It's got to do with the Greenway project and my recipe.
Yeah, of course, obviously.
My favorite object.
Has everyone answered? Yes?
Yeah.
All right, I'll go to last slide. Well, sorry, my computer is not liking this. And to finish it off, we're gonna do some questions about your culture. So what is your favorite food? And what is your favorite object? So that can be a physical object like clothing or an instrument, or it could be non-material object like a song or a skill. So I'll give you a couple minutes to answer these questions.
I just submitted mine, but mine was neither of those things. It was a feeling, emotion.
Oh, that's fine.
Sorry.
Feeling that's completely fine.
All right, so let's get rid of that. Hold on. I'm just gonna put this out there, guys. I never ever see my country on a map ever in the world, and that's because I'm Kurdish. So I'm gonna put that out there because Barbara, you know that's gonna come out if I'm in any meeting. You know that's gonna come out, and I'm quite offended by the world map. By the way, just to let you know, just to let everyone know.
What's my favourite food?
I'm offended by the world map.
I think that applies to a lot of people who don't fit in, including my husband.
I'm stateless.
What's my favourite object? I can't.
You could just put me down for that. It's all right. You know.
All right. Has everyone answered?
Yeah.
All right, then thank you very much for answering these couple of questions. We're going to move on to the workshop now. Philippa.
Hi there, everyone. So we just wanted to sort of make our workshops more of a conversation. We didn't feel like we could just ask loads and loads of questions about museums and stuff like that. We felt like it needed to be a more open-ended discussion. So we've just got 2 questions on the topic of decolonisation. So we just want to start sort of the discussion of what does decolonisation mean to you, and what is a world without colonising, in terms, you know, of like politics, philosophy, religion, food, drink, clothing, music. How do you think the UK would look like, or how do you think other countries might look like if this hadn't occurred? So does anybody have anything that they'd like to say? It could be one of these questions, or it could be slightly off the topic as well. It's just more about a conversation.
I think colonization is everywhere, even within the workplace, even within, you know, I try to think of myself as someone very open-minded, equal opportunities kind of person, very in touch with diversity, inclusion, etc., all of that stuff. But I think even words like BAME, I have problems with. I have a problem with that, and I feel like maybe someone like me didn't make that word up. Maybe it was a white person, and I feel like that plays a hand in colonization a bit. And even work, you know, if I close my eyes, I'll associate a white male to be a manager somewhere, and it is that conditioning as well that we have, and that's also to do with representation, you know. So for example, in schools, how often do we see someone like me being a teacher? So representation plays a part in that. And like even in museums, I'll see something that I know has been stolen from Kurdistan or Mesopotamia and is there, and it being physically there in a way is important, because I get to show my kids who are mixed heritage, and you know, this is what this is, and this is actually the real story that I know, and it's not what it says on the plaque, and this is the real story, and these are from my forefathers that I passed that on. And if I don't have those stories, I'll have to go by what it says on the museum plaque, which my history doesn't agree with sometimes, which is what I call real history. It's not the stuff you find in the books. So also history is interesting as well. You know, I was having a conversation with someone earlier, and she said, for some people Saddam Hussein is a hero, and I said, well, for people like me, he's not a hero. He's killed a lot of Kurdish people. He's done, you know, genocide, and it was that, how do people view figures like that, who to me are like demons? Some people will name their kids Saddam because they think Saddam Hussein was a hero, a savior of some kind. But that's not colonization. I'm just saying history, and even the fact that, you know, for example, Black History Month, okay, all the organizations, educational organizations, somehow panic and struggle in the lead up to Black History Month because they're thinking, oh, what do we need to teach them? Well, it's not new. It's not a new Black History Month. And I'm sorry to say this, but why is it sometimes it's white people teaching Black communities these things, or taking the lead on these things? And it's not nice for you to hear that. I'm sure you hear that everywhere. You know, why is it always white people? But that plays, for me, that plays a hand in colonization. And sometimes it comes easier when it's from your own people, because the stories you will share and tell are, and when I say your own, I mean people that you relate to, that look like you, that you feel are from your own actual communities and race. And it's easier to accept, it's easier to talk about these things. And also another part of colonization and decolonization and storytelling is, I find it quite traumatic when people are told to tell their stories and their histories, and they're told to tell the same people, you know, the same sort of like someone, this is going to come out so wrong, but you know, like someone that's gone and done a year's course on storytelling, and they go and like explore in Kabul to hear stories of, yeah, it's just like, I don't know, I find that plays its part in colonization. But I do know the importance of storytelling and capturing stories, because you need to capture it while it's here, while we have the older generation to hear it from. So I just think it's a matter of representation, and once again, inclusion, having people that have lived these things to tell their stories. It will sound different to the way me and you would retell their story. Actually hearing their voices, just actual voices, hearing it in their language, because language is also different. It's, if I tell you one sentence in Kurdish and translate that into English, it loses 80% of its depth and meaning, because language also plays its part in these things too. So there's much more I can say, but I'll leave it there from me. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, that was really interesting. I mean, we've had some ideas of how like a museum might manifest, or in a virtual or a digital sort of tools, and this idea of storytelling, but not just, and if you go into a museum, it's a plaque and you read it and that's the story you're told, and you go away and you think that's the only story to do with that artifact. And also whether or not that artifact needs to be the actual real thing, or can a replica do just the same job to sort of invoke someone to maybe tell their own story about that piece. So that was really interesting. Does anybody else have anything else they want to add to this?
I was just going to say, I think to that point, I think the accessibility side of things, especially with modern day digital accessibility, that's something that we discovered through thinking of new ways to conceptualize a museum. The digital platform offers that accessible for all, and gives an opportunity for people from areas to actually come forward and be able to tell them stories. So that's where we were kind of trying to head with that digital platform of the museum, thinking of it as not being captured through one bottleneck of a perspective, but being able to be a platform that can be shared to from multiple levels.
Can I ask Tara something that you were saying there that was just that, is it that you're saying that colonization has created a system where certain countries and peoples within those countries have become all powerful, and then now we're retelling the story through that powerful lens because it's being completely hard, and that's hard baking?
Yeah,
that
conversation. Yeah, this is interesting. Is really, well, for me, it's colonization played a huge part in what happened to Kurdistan, and that's personal for me, and I think I can't explain it. I can't explain in Kurdish, in English, what I mean is, colonization in some ways can empower certain figures that Oh, I'm lost in my thoughts. Sorry, I'm lost in my thoughts. What were you trying to say again? Sorry, I just went off onto another point.
No, I thought what you were saying was really, really interesting. So I was just thinking that the colonisation that has happened up until now in through history has created a system where some populations are more powerful in terms of the stories that are told and the way those stories are told, and indeed even the technologies and the algorithms with which we write all our new programs and stuff. And then, although those demographics may or may not be still continuing with their physical colonialization of place, perhaps we are still continuing to colonialize because we have set the systems up, and we're still working within the systems that is hard baking that in if we're not hearing the voice and amplifying the voice.
I mean, yes, because I see that if I just basically look at, for example, what happened in Iraq, just as an example, you know, America went in to liberate, stayed on, and now there are so many universities, so many people in powerful, well-connected people that have set up base in Iraq and Kurdistan, and they've got American universities, and the systems that they use to teach are in English, and it's American studying, and now everyone's got an American accent, and it's like, what is going on here? What about our language? Because, you know, why don't they reverse that? And if you really want to work in Kurdistan, because there's so much opportunities, and if you really want to work in Iraq, you go and learn in Kurdish. Go and learn Kurdish so you could use that language and teach and whatever, do whatever you want in the country that you're going to. Why is it still that we see English and we see, you know, the Western world as the leaders in every way, and you know, sometimes I see it through my work where I could be doing the same job as you, but I could be saying the same thing as you, but they'll come to you and they'll say, Emma knows better than Tara. And it's basically because they associate that superiority kind of thing with you because you're white. And I see that all the time. And I get that because I think like that sometimes. And then I catch myself in my thoughts and I think, no, that's not, you know, it's not true. And I just think there's so many layers to it. And I think also having those really uncomfortable conversations around it is what needs to be happening. It's uncomfortable. You know, it's not your fault that you are born into your race and there's some colonization attached to whatever, some cultures and the Western world countries, but let's have those conversations and really make people uncomfortable,
and,
you know?
And I think like when you look at that question, what is the world without colonialism? It's most definitely the appreciation and the adoption of indigenous cultural knowledge systems. And through the adoption of those, we're talking about the adoption of African business standards, you know. So from like what Tara's saying, that most would take on a Western approach, and that's just because that some of those business operation systems have been implemented with that in mind, as in this is the ISO of, you know, a marketing company must have this standard, and if you want to do, you know, you need to have this standard, and those standards, yes, they could be universal standards, but those standards have then become the bedrock of a Western approach of authentication of a business. So therefore, even when you find people that want to use their own approaches, the approaches may clash because they're trying to figure out what's the right way and what's not the right way. Until you know, oh, right, this is the ISO that I have to do in order for it to be validated easier, then that's what you would do. But it only means that things only fit in that one boat, in that one shape, in that one legal format, in order for it to be adopted.
As people of color, if you make a fuss about that, you will be known as the aggressive person, you know? It's not that you have your ways that work in your culture and in your, you know, your method. It's not, they don't see it as that. And I think if you make a fuss sometimes as one individual to express what you've just said or to stick to your way of knowing that something works or whatever your business approach. I think it's easier for the general public to say, oh, another complaining Black or Asian person, but that's not the case. It's, you've got a lot to share, and I think, again, colonization plays its part in that, really.
Yeah, and I see colonization as a market. So where people create their own markets and take over other nations and populations so that they can increase their market share because they've got more consumers consuming their goods and with creating that supply chain. Where you find most African, Caribbean, and Asian communities not seeing that worth is because that market, every time that community market seems to want to establish itself, it gets broken. So therefore, it never has a cycle to say, that's great that you've got a Western elite infrastructure that works for your business and works for community and works for everybody. That's great. Here's how this community does this, and this works too. This is great. Here's how this community does it. This works. This too is great. And then you've got like a spiral of intertwining wheels that work in their own silos, but collectively they work. Currently, you just only have one, and everything else that tries seems to work a little bit or at a slower pace, and then breaks down, or it's glitches, you could say, but one seems to be the main one, and that to me is what colonialism is. It's that it's just one main frame that's dominating everything else around it. So I'll leave it there.
And is that then an opportunity through the digital platforms to put some of those other interpretations and views and histories on a more equal basis with what is currently the dominant colonial worldview?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that was our approach, by providing that opportunity to the people and the youth group themselves to equally contribute to the production of a digital platform that might become a form of museum as a curation, and handing that over to the people themselves.
I'm really sorry to cut. I think we need to move on to the next question because we have 7 minutes left.
Yep. Hey, everyone. So for the second and final workshop, we would like to open a discussion about the museum itself. So here we've got two questions that will hopefully get the conversation going. The first one is, what do you think a museum is? And the second one, what will the museum for St. Paul's reflect? For example, do you think it should be more virtual with everything that's going on at the moment, or physical? Or maybe what would you like to see there? Or how do you think a museum could celebrate the cultural diversity of St. Paul's? Anything you would like to share? Your views on this?
I personally really think what you guys were talking about earlier in terms of digital museum, I mean, what we all know museums as is physical spaces, and in itself talking about colonialism, that, and people are curating museums, and the people that are curating museums are normally specifically selected for their knowledge and experience as well. So there's something about the idea of curation and enabling local community to curate their own history and past and teach that to people. I think it's a completely different approach to what a museum, which you'd assume is a colonized concept in itself.
I think it will be interesting in St. Paul's, because when I moved here from London, everyone told me, do not go to St. Paul's, you will end up getting shot. That's what I thought about St. Paul's. Okay, so I was warned against moving to St. Paul's, and as soon as I stepped in here, I was like, oh God, there's like a real community that it's like, it felt like the heart of Bristol. And I've had no issues. I've never been in danger in St. Paul's. I've been here for 10 years now. And for me, looking back now, what I know that was missing was me. I didn't know the history of St. Paul's. I didn't know the history about the carnival. I didn't know, I didn't know any of this history. So if I think of an effective sort of museum, maybe it could be virtual, but for St. Paul's, it'll be really interesting to have like a timeline, a timeline, and then leaving 2020 onwards empty so that history can continue, and then whoever takes on the project like down the future when we're all old and wrinkly, like these new generations could come and add to keep making the history of St. Paul's, adding to the timeline. But that's just an image in my head, because if I knew, if when I moved here, if there were things in the community where I could see, this is what happened in St. Paul's, this road means this, or this mural on the wall means this. And because I started up St. Paul's Community Garden a few years ago, and there was a big wall and there's a mural, and we didn't know because it had plants everywhere, and we moved everything, we cleared it, and there's a huge beautiful mural that has got a whole history behind it that I knew nothing about. So these are things that get lost in St. Paul's, and it might be 50-year history or 100-year history, but it's still history. And because I didn't know how special it was, I was like, oh, let's just paint over it, until I got Sophie and Rob that did the murals for the Greenway project. I got them to look into it, and they found so much history about it, and we realized, oh my God, actually we need to really protect this, then paint over it, because it's history. So some kind of timeline would be interesting, and also leaving history empty for 2020 onwards, so that people could add to that history, make your own history. That might be interesting. It's just a little idea. I don't know if that answers anything what you said, but I envision a true museum to be a true representation of what has happened to a certain people or a certain place. I don't enjoy going to museums anymore here, because I don't feel they tell a true story of the people who had gone through whatever this thing is, that you've got in your museum saying this is from Mesopotamia. Like, what? Okay, yeah, you're given facts, but why'd you take this? Why'd you take this from our country? Why is it here? I want to know why it ended up here. And so a true representation would be nice in a museum.
Tara, I agree with you, and I happen to know the history of that mural because I'm that old. But also, like, a lot of what's been said has been about digital stuff and apps. I use digital stuff. I spend most of my life on Zoom. But you also said that you'd spoken to this person who was like really old. You're excluding a whole huge area of the population if it's so centered on digital activity.
And I think they'll have the best stories, to be honest. They'll have the most interesting stories.
They might tell their stories, but then they're going to be excluded from their stories. So I'm just throwing that in. I work with populations, and I work digitally, and also I work actually within the arts, and I work within art and referral quite a lot. And we're looking at ways to work digitally, which is obviously what we've been doing since March, but also in non-digital ways that can reach the people that don't have computers or can't access Zoom. And, yes, everything's got to be digital now, but it just kind of makes my heart fail when you go on and on and on about it all being on apps and digital.
Yeah,
it's got a place. I use it, but it's only a place. And I don't know where the funding is coming for all this, because you're talking about the idea of it being sustainable. How does that work? Nothing in St. Paul's has been sustainable. You talk about St. Paul's Unlimited. That was sustainable for quite a long time, and then it went. So, the only thing we've got sustainable at the moment is Tara. So she's got to sort of stay here till she's 99.
Oh, Barbara, I love this. Thanks.
So it's 8 o'clock now. I don't know if anyone needs to go anywhere, but this is the official end of the event. It was really, really lovely. And we got a lot of information up from you guys. Thank you, Tara. You're very vocal, which we really, really appreciate. And Barbara and everyone else for coming. We really do appreciate it. I'm not sure if Sibs has anything else that he'd like to say before we end. We've just got our contact details here for the museum group. And then the live group had sent out the Zoom link. So if you did want to, sorry, the green space, the Ashley green space. So if you did want to get back to the Ashley green space, you could just reply to the email that had the Zoom link on it. Otherwise, we've got the museum group here. And we will follow up with an email for you guys that attended.
So you were, can I just make one point, right? You were looking for a steering, you're looking to add to a steering group made of residents. What is that steering group for? Right at the beginning, you mentioned it, because I'm going to round up people and I'm going to send them your way.
Yes, please. So that is for the Ashley Ward neighborhood planning team.
Okay.
And there's obviously going to be different subgroups, such as parks, streets, planning. There's already a planning group that's looking at all the planning applications that currently come in. They meet up with Mike, councillor here in Ashley Ward, who gives them an update.
I'm on that, but I've missed some of the meetings because of the
Oh,
time.
they've only had one. The next one's coming up in December, in January. And so there'll be different subgroups, but we're looking for people that want to get involved. And alongside the neighborhood plan, it will be the Community Land Trust. So we're speaking with the Community Land Trust organization. And once again, there's a huge lack of representation around communities of color taking on assets or managing land or working in partnership with housing associations. Now, we go back again to the same issue that you raised, is that most of these things are not funded. And thus you find that a lot of other more capital or enabled communities are more able to get involved, especially those that are more mature of age seem to be more involved in these things. But we need to find ways to get involved and to keep an ongoing presence, so that we can go through the support that this land trust is going to be providing until we find the land. And then we can let the land, or, I don't know, build on the land, whichever way that looks. But this whole process is roughly between 1.5 to 2.5 years worth of planning that other organizations have already gone through. It wouldn't be just a timeline for Ashley Ward. This is just more or less how long it takes. But there's land available, and City Council has just made that policy very clear. And it will be also creating a subgroup that looks into that. So there's a lot of opportunities. I personally think there's so many opportunities. Sometimes it's hard to find the people that will go the long way. So thank you very much for dedicating your Tuesday evening to this. This is just the beginning of the consultation. And we will be back, I believe, early next year, with some feedback, suggestions. So please do keep in touch, and we'll follow up with the recording and also a brief survey. Am I correct?
Yes.
Can I ask, please, one last thing? The way I found out about this was, I think some of you architects were posting it on some community groups and on social media. Is there another way that we can find out information about you that's not through certain community groups? Like, do you have a page that we could share that's more accessible for, or a website that, that I've got loads of residents here that might not have Facebook, so I wanted to share things with them? But is there more powerful ways that you guys could connect, or direct ways?
I'm currently going through a rebranding for the organization, so most of our stuff is going to be coming down. That's a good
answer. Thank you.
But we'll try and maintain an online presence as much as possible. Maybe to just be a separate landing page for the St. Paul's
That's
neighborhood
great.
plan.
Anyhow, that is more noticeable for people online. I think that might make a big impact on the number of people that turn up to these meetings.
Yes,
but thank you so much,
that's
guys.
very important.
It's been great. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to seeing what goes next. thank you so much to you architects as well. Thanks everyone.
Yeah, bless.
Thank you so much for
Thank
coming, guys.
Thank you everyone.
For coming.
Bye bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks ever so much for that session, guys. Really appreciate it. I will leave you to do your thing. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers, guys. Have a nice evening.
Oh, when you say
you.
cheers, guys, hold on for a little bit.
It's always the first one to leave.
My eyes are
Yeah.
sore.
Yeah. I can't seem to find my screen.
George is here.
Honestly, I'm lost within this thing now. Jeez, I can't find pause.
Well
I
done,
can't
everyone.
find nothing.
I thought that was quite engaging and quite interesting.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
You guys smashed it.
I think Tara makes a good point though. So, because I went on Sunday and I just posted this thing over every Parks group in, I think a lot of the people that are on one Parks group aren't interested in hearing about other parks.
Yeah.
Might be one of the problems. Like, why are you taking away our opportunities with your parks? But I do think there's hopefully maybe a goal is to try and get some more marketing material